Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and you may have just watched my blank nodes video, been super excited about using them, throwing them all over all of the ontologies you're creating. This video is to calm you down a little bit and talk about their dangers. Don't just go out there and use blank nodes willy-nilly without knowing the sort of damage that they can do. Let's get into it. It's a quick video, only a couple of dangers. First, we're going to recap what blank nodes are. If you forgot, you just watched the other video and just in one ear out the other. But then we're going to talk about the two dangers. First off, blank nodes are unreferenceable. That's going to come back and bite you. I promise it's going to do it no matter what. You're going to think you're immune to it. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. And also, blank nodes are not idempotent. What does that mean? How does that hurt you? We'll talk about that in a second. All right. We refer to things by their unique names. Those are their URIs, their IRIs. And then for existential claims, we use blank nodes. Great. These blank nodes are anonymous and they match our meanings, because when I say that Annie loves somebody, I'm not coming up with a unique name for that somebody. I'm saying, just something that's a person. Blank nodes capture sort of what's going on that we're doing in natural language there. When we represent those, we throw them in square brackets. That's how they look in turtle format. You might see them in this underscore approach as well. Great. We've got those, so we say Garfield is on the mat. We don't just say Garfield is on something that's a mat with like a new colon and mat. No, we create a blank node. That's all there was to it. It's great. They're super useful. We'll see all sorts of examples of me using that in the channel. But before we get excited about using them, I want to caution us a little bit about when you start building your ontology and you go too hard into blank nodes, it might come back and bite you. Hopefully this video prevents a little bit of long-term pain for at least some of you out there. All right, the first issue is with referenceability. So if we use the square bracket somewhere, you just can't refer to those square brackets anywhere else in your document, right? So if I say in my turtle file, I say Annie loves, and I put square brackets, a person, and I close the square brackets and I put the period, and then I want to talk about that person later, I can't do it. I've got to go back up into those square brackets. That is the one spot where I get to say anything about that existential object. That might be fine. That's part of the point of using sort of a throwaway anonymous node. But in everyday conversation, I think we do refer to stuff a little bit more, right? If I say somebody left the fridge open, my wife could respond and be like, are you that somebody, right? Or did that somebody also not clean their room, right? We understand that I'm using that somebody as like a temporary name for that thing, and I can reuse that over and over again. You can't do that with the square brackets. You can do that locally with that underscore BN approach, right? So then we could refer to that multiple times within the same document, but you can only do it locally within that document. So if I want to refer to something and then I want to write a new turtle file over here and talk about that thing, you're out of luck. You can't do it if you used blank nodes. Okay, so why does this matter? Two places I think that it matters the most are for file readability. So if I want to talk about an object, blank nodes are sometimes really clean ways to do it. I can put the anonymous thing all in one place. It's sort of self-contained. I actually really like that sometimes. But if you do want to reference it in multiple places and you do the underscore approach, it can be kind of harder to follow that. So maybe that's not a good way to go and you want to just come up with a new unique name for it. The other place, and this is the biggest place by far, where the failure to refer to it shows up, it's writing queries. So let's say I've got some ontology, I want to ask some questions about it. I say, okay, on what day was Casey married? And I get back a blank node for that day, right? Some anonymous string, right? Or it just says BN. Depends on what triple store you're using when you're writing the query, how that formats when it's coming back to you. But I might want to ask some follow-up questions about that day, right? What day of the week was that day? And so I write a new query and I want to say that day was, and I ask other things about it. But if it's a blank node, I can't just directly refer to that thing again, or it's very difficult to. Instead, I need to re-ask my initial query with like follow-up things about that blank node. We'll see examples of this in the future. For now, just suffice to say that if you want to ask follow-up questions about something, you think that's a thing people are going to do, you might want it to be a name, because it's going to get harder and harder to refer back to it, or you're going to create these like really convoluted queries that have to refer to this blank node by its space in the ontology rather than just giving it a name so you can ask about it in particular. Second danger that I want to bring up here is idempotence. So an idempotent process, right, is something that gives you the same thing every time when you rerun it. Triple stores under the hood are actually still coming up with names. So this is a little annoying, right? When I motivated creating blank nodes, part of the thought was semantically, when I say that someone's outside my window or whatever, I'm not coming up with a name for that person that's outside my window. And a nice thing about blank nodes is they capture that. They sort of preserve that failure to come up with a name. But when you load it into a triple store, the triple store says, okay, so this is an anonymous thing, let's call it blah. And they come up with some UID or whatever that they throw in under the hood to implement. And then every time they're writing queries about it, they're referring to that sort of locally randomly generated identifier. Not a big deal if we're not looking under the hood, but if you load something into a triple store and then you load it again to the triple store, it's not going to come up with the same under the hood identifier, or it need not. This is sort of some sort of random process, right? This means that it's not going to be a repeatable process, and that can come back to bite you. So two ways that can come back to bite you. One is if you wanted to recreate your load. So I load a bunch of data into a triple store and then I run some queries against it. And then something gets corrupted or I change something about the way my ontology looks. I wipe it and I load it back in again. Well, if you had blank nodes in it, everything else about your data might look the same, but the blank nodes are all going to have different identifiers under the hood. And if you want it to look exactly the same, you set up some testing infrastructure, some test harness that is going to expect certain characters to look the same and come back with a diff for you. Well, it's going to have a difference because those blank nodes don't have the same names anymore. Referring back to the previous slide too, right? When you have this issue of referenceability, if I want to write a query, maybe there is some way for me to write a query that picks out a specific blank node. But when I reload the data, that blank node's got a new name. So the under the hood, UID is not going to be the same thing that I call. Not the end of the world. This sort of preserves, I think, the intent of blank nodes, which is these are anonymous. Their names don't matter. But we know how this works. When you're enterprise or, even if you're doing something on your own, you set up some processes. Every time something is not repeatable, is not the same, that's a potential stumbling block. So watch out for that. Another issue here, and this has gotten me several times, right? I can load some data into a triple store, and then I tweak something, and I just re-upload the same data into the triple store. And when I use like Jenna Fuseki or GraphDB, a number of these different places are great because they get rid of duplicate triples. So it's no problem. Like if I upload, Casey Loves Annie, and I upload Casey Loves Annie again, just that single triple, they'll cancel each other out. I'll still have a triple store that has only one triple in it. That's great. And so I get into the habit of doing this. And now let's say I've got an ontology where I have blank nodes in it. And I upload the ontology. Awesome. And then I change a few things, like I change a label for myself, or I add one new entity to it, just like an extra triple at the end of my file, and I just re-upload it into the exact same file. I might think, well, I added only one triple to my original content, and so re-uploading the file will only add one triple to my triple store. It's not true, because if you had blank nodes in it, it doesn't treat the blank nodes when you're re-uploading as the same blank nodes in your first upload. So you might double the number of blank nodes that showed up. And this happened to me a number of times with dates especially. It's a thing to watch out for. It might sound trivial now, but when you run into the problem, it's really annoying. Okay. So here are a couple of dangers. I've said blank nodes are good. Now blank nodes are dangerous. What should I do? Are they worth it? It's a cost benefit, right? So the benefit, maybe there's a semantic benefit, but there's also the benefit that I just don't need to come up with names for things when I make them blank nodes. And that's good. But the cost is that I'm not going to be able to go back and refer to these things again. So the question you have to ask yourself whenever you're deciding, do I want to come up with a name for this thing or just leave it as a blank node, is how likely is it that I'll have to go back and come up with names for these things in the future? Am I going to want to query about them? Am I going to want to refer to them? Am I going to want to modify those things? And if the chance is more than just a minuscule one, just name them now. It's not hard to just come up with, you could even use UIDs yourself. You can use the integers and just say random thing 1, random thing 2. There's all sorts of naming conventions that you can use. that will essentially make them anonymous, but will give you a consistent and predictable name that you can always go back to if you needed to have it. If there's no chance that you're going to be asking queries about these things later, then blank nodes are the way to go. But usually it sits somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think I'm going to be asking queries about these things in the future, but there's not a zero chance. Like, who knows what's going to happen, right? The whole point of building ontologies, this is an extensible and changeable model that we don't know the things that we don't know. We want to be able to leverage it for new applications later. What happens? What if? And this is the ongoing dilemma for an ontologist. We need to simplify the model so that it's doable and practical, but we need to leave the possibilities to grow it into whatever potential uses someone might have for it in the future. And in the middle, this is where the art of being a good ontologist comes from. You're going to have to make a choice. Hopefully, I've given you some heuristics to make that choice in a wiser way, but you're going to make it wrong sometimes. It's going to come back and bite you. If that's happened to you, go ahead and drop an example of that down in the comments. I would love to learn from others. It's an ongoing, difficult choice. How do we decide which things are blank and which things aren't blank? Blank nodes are really valuable. They're really useful. But some people just swear them off entirely. Some people use them all over the place. Would love to hear your experiences. You've got a sense for mine here. I do it for dates. I do it for quantities. I do it in limited other cases when I ask myself this question, am I going to want to refer to this again? And if I'm pretty sure no, then it'll go in as a blank node. In summary, blank nodes match our semantics for existentials, but unlike natural language, you just can't refer to them as easily even within context. And the way a triple store operates, under the hood, blank node generation is just going to be inconsistent. Every time you upload it, it's going to come up with a new name under the hood. You won't know what that name is. I want to make sure that you're using blank nodes because they're a really valuable tool. They're an important tool, but only use them when you're actually getting the better end of that cost-benefit analysis. All right, that's what I've got. Avoid the pitfalls, avoid the dangers of blank nodes, but get all of their benefits. And whatever you do, like and subscribe to my channel. I hope to see you for the next video.